Hello, my name is Matthew, and welcome to Cult Classic Mania. And before the show starts, I just wanted to take a few seconds to thank you for downloading and listening to the show. We hope you enjoy this brief introduction and our top 10 favorite B horror movies of all time.
I wanna believe in things I can't see. Explore the unknown and try to sing in key.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Cult Classic Mania. I decided to create Cult Classic Mania podcast because this is my way of showing appreciation to cult classic films. Now, I don't know about everybody else, but I personally grew up on watching these movies. I felt like for me it was my responsibility not necessarily push these movies onto people, but shed some light and appreciation for these movies for people that are touch their toes into the water of horror, but they don't know beyond the popular movies. I'm talking about like the Chuckies, the Friday the 13th, maybe, sometimes Halloween. That I feel this is a way for me to talk about beyond those movies. Now, to kind of start off the show, I figured the best way to do this was talk about personally my top 10 favorite B horror movies of all time. So I guess the best way to start out with this list, I think this would be a fairly controversial number one for my list, because I know I mentioned that it was a fairly popular movie, but the very first Halloween from 1978. Now, I realize that Halloween is a popular movie, but, there's newer generations that come out and want to start diving into horror, and maybe they might accidentally watch, the awful Rob Zombie remakes, and they paint a wrong picture of what Michael Myers was. He wasn't some cliche serial killer that kills animals for fun as a kid. That's not what Michael Myers was, and Rob Zombie completely changed that story. So maybe there were some people out there that didn't watch the originals first and directly jumped to the Rob Zombie versions. That's why I figured Halloween was a great number one slasher to have. Oh man, and for number two, I decided to go with Dawn of the Dead from 1978. Oh man, such a classic zombie movie. Romero, there's not enough that you can say about Romero. He is the legendary zombie writer and director. This movie seriously had a $500,000 budget, and it's primarily in one area, and it was a shopping center. That's insane to me. They had this tiny budget, well, what was considered a tiny budget for those movies back then, and they just had it all in one central location of just a badass zombie movie. There's not much more I could say. And even the remake too. What year did it come out? 2004, I believe. Even that remake, it's still considered one of the best remakes of a movie of all time. And I have to agree, because I'm a very critical person when it comes to remakes. I think most remakes of horror movies are god awful, if I'm being honest. But even to this day, I can still watch the Dawn of the Dead remake 100 times over, and it never gets old. Number three on the list is Suspiria from 1977, directed by the legendary Italian director Dario Argentino. This is a supernatural film. It's basically a Susie Banio, I believe her name was. She's an American ballet student, and she wants to basically learn how to dance in Munich, Germany. She basically finds out that there was a murder that was taking place at the school, and is afraid, and there's just supernatural issues that are going on, blah, blah, blah. It's haunted. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of supernatural films, but I am a huge fan of Dario Argentino and his personal take on horror. This movie did have a pretty big budget from what I understand. It was a $1.8 million budget in terms of times and when it was filmed, 1977. That was a pretty big budget for what is considered a cult classic movie. Yeah, and not much more I can say about Suspiria. It was remade this current year. I have not seen the remake because it wasn't released in any theaters nearby for me. Number four on the list, David Cronenberg's Videodrome from 1983. I consider it a paranormal slash science fiction movie, sort of a poltergeist movie, if you will. I basically have a television show, no plot to it. It's sort of like a Seinfeld-esque plot. There's nothing happens, basically. It's just a supernatural film. I believe it should be on this list, for sure. Number 5 on the list, David Cronenberg's Shivers from 1975. It's never really mentioned, but I guess you would consider it a zombie movie. Cronenberg's over-the-top, typical horror slash science fiction movie. Basically, there's this acid that overcomes these people and this high-rise apartment and turns them into zombie-like creatures, basically. But yeah, this movie, it had a budget of $180,000. I believe this is a Cronenberg movie that deserves to be on the top 5. Number 6, Terror Firmer, 1999, by Trauma Entertainment, aka Lloyd Kaufman. Oh man, I love trauma movies, especially Terror Firmer. It was one of the first Lloyd Kaufman movies I've ever watched, and I was not prepared for it at all. I seriously wasn't. My brother, he used to watch trauma movies all the time, and I'd ask like, man, that cover looks awesome. I really want to watch that movie. But he would tell me all the time, you are not prepared for this, and you are too young to watch these movies. You need to wait a couple of years. And I can see why now that he told me to do that, because I've never watched a movie that had more cum, shit, and blood and puke than any other movie. This movie is all out disgusting, and I think it's like a 2-hour long movie. It's just 2 hours of pure insanity. And I'm not necessarily sure what the budget was, but I believe, yeah, it was only a $500,000 budget. All out insanity. IMDb, it has like a 2.5 rating, and I just don't think people understand the purpose of a Lloyd Kaufman movie. But I believe, like, I think deep down, Lloyd is like, yes, it's a 2.5 rating. That's what I've wanted all along. But yeah, fucking Lloyd Kaufman movies, trauma movies, they change your life whenever you watch them. It's insane. Number 7 is Phantasm from 1979. I guess you would consider this a slasher or, maybe a creature feature, but the premise is basically there's a bunch of killer dwarfs in a mortuary and a cemetery just terrorizing these people. It's just one of those fun movies to watch, putting on in the background and watch. I think it's very enjoyable. Yeah, it just deserves to be on the list. Number 8, Bad Taste from 1987, directed by the one and only Peter Jackson. Now, most people recognize the name Peter Jackson because he did, the Lord of the Rings series, he did King Kong, blah, blah, blah. All those big budget, major cinema movies. But before that, Peter Jackson was a horror head, and he loved making low budget films. Well, he couldn't afford to do big budget films at the time, but Bad Taste was a insanely funny alien movie that he decided to create with his friends. And it only had an $11,000 budget. The aliens, there's supposed to be aliens, but it's literally just his friends and blue button-up shirts and jeans yelling over and over. I mean, you think it's a zombie, but it's actually an alien. It's insane. I can't remember exactly how much he made back on that movie, but it was well above his budget. Your old Peter Jackson movies, I highly recommend going back and watching his old movies before he really hit the quote-unquote big time as a director. Number 9, Black Sabbath from 1963. Now, I'm not talking about the greatest heavy metal band of all time, but I am talking about the anthology movie Black Sabbath, directed by Mario Bava. Now, anthologies, there's not a whole lot of notable anthologies, but I personally believe this is a good way to dive more into the anthologies of horror. It consists of 3 short stories: The Telephone, The Word Lock, and The Drop of Water. My personal favorite was The Drop of Water, where basically there is a caretaker for this elderly lady, and the caretaker steals a important ring from her, basically. And once the elderly woman dies, she haunts the caretaker, and it just basically terrifies her until she dies. Yeah, it's one of those anthologies that I believe everyone should watch. And last but definitely not least is An American Werewolf in London from 1981. Now, me personally, I'm not a major fan of werewolf movies because they just get beaten to death, and you pretty much know the premises right off the bat. Yeah, in terms of no werewolf at full moon, he needs to be killed by a silver bullet, blah blah blah. But I feel like An American Werewolf in London is a good starting point if you want to know more about the whole werewolf trope, if that makes sense. But yeah, definitely I feel like if you're gonna watch a werewolf movie for the first time, An American Werewolf in London is a good starting point. So for my number 10, I had a hard time coming up with a number 10. So I decided to make a runners-up list, basically, of all the possibilities that I had before I decided on An American Werewolf in London. I'll just mention the title of the movie and the year it came out. If you want to look more into these movies yourself, you can. But for the number 1 runner-up, Street Trash from 1986. Number 2, John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. Surf Nazis Must Die from 1987. It's another Troma Entertainment movie. Number 4, Hellraiser from 1987. And of course, number 5, Reanimator, 1985. And those were my top 10 B horror movies of all time, plus my top 5 runner-up. And again, I would like to thank you for downloading and listening to this podcast. If you're still listening, I hope this gives an idea of what I'm going to talk about in the future. And especially given the list, I hope that gives you a better idea of what we'll be talking about. But that'll be all for right now. My next episode, I will be talking about the 1997 classic, Jack Frost. It's Christmas time. What's a better movie to get in the Christmas spirit for? It's Jack Frost. Can't go wrong with it. But yeah, that's it for now. Go ahead and follow me at Matthew X Heckman on Instagram. And if you feel like my list sucks and you want to give me your list, I'm all ears. I want to hear your ideas and your list. Big shout out to the Moans for letting me use their song Rock and Roll Horror Show as the intro song. That is from their demo All Grown Up. They're based out of California. Be sure to check them out. Also, I would like to give a big shout out to at Dozens of Unique Geese on Instagram for this awesome logo for Cult Classic Mania. He made that happen. He captured my vision, and it's absolutely awesome. But that's it for now, and look forward to my review of Jack Frost.
I wanna believe in things I can't see. Explore the unknown and try to